All right, guys, we're going to get started. Today we're going to talk about deformers for a little bit, and we'll also talk about skinning, which is the method we're going to use to combine your geometry with your rig. Now, before we do that, over the weekend, a couple students emailed me regarding an issue with the right IKFK arm switch. So I just wanted to address that real quick so that you guys will have a means to sort of fix that. And then also I wanted to talk about the finger controller for the right arm. So let's take a look at that. Now, I'll start with the finger first. So this issue with the fingers, this can be corrected at any time. So if you've already done your IKFK switch, if you've already set up the entire arm, whatever, you can correct this at any time. It won't harm anything. But if we were to look at the actual joints themselves for their local rotation axis, let me grab this arm and actually I think this is the good character. Let me go to the one that's not fixed. And let's grab this arm and let's turn on the local rotation axis and take a look. Crap. Did I fix this one? No. Okay. No, this one's still broken. Okay. So because of the way we mirrored our arms over, it offset the local rotation axis for all the joints in this arm hierarchy. Now, for the most part, this won't actually affect anything for your rigging. The only area we might run into a problem is with your fingers. So if you take a look at the local rotation axis for the finger joints themselves, thinking about how these need to actually rotate. So with our other hand, we set up the finger curls to rotate in the Z-axis. But because of the way we mirrored these over, the Z-axis is pointing kind of off to the side, and then our X's aren't actually pointing down the joint chain. So this is something we would have to fix by hand, and just kind of to show you the difference, let's look at the other arm, which is correct. Let's go back to object mode, grab that. And just take a look at what the other hand is doing. So if you'll notice here, the X's are pointing down the hierarchy of the joints, the Y's are pointing up, and then the Z's are pointing forward, sort of in the same direction our character is facing overall. Because of the way these are pointed, for our finger curls, our fingers are rotating on that Z-axis, and that's what's giving us that forward curl on our fingers. So when we come in here and grab this controller and let's say for our index finger here, it's rotating on Z to give us that curl functionality out of that. Now with our other hand, because of the way the local rotation axis is set up, if I were to grab all three of these joints, and I mean you can tell just by looking at the rotation tool, it's off because I don't have a Z that's aligned with the finger to grab. But if I were to go over here and grab the actual Z axis from the channel box and start to rotate this, I get this weird warping curling effect. So you would need to fix this before, well, you could still set up the finger controller. Just make sure you fix this at some point. And so there's two ways you can fix this. One way is to do it by hand, no pun intended. So if I were to grab the shoulder joint here for our normal arm, and then go up here and switch over to component mode, and just make sure that you have our local rotation axis brought up. What we would do is go through each of these joints and rotate them to be more similar to the joints on the opposite hand. So if I were to come in here, and again, all of our Y's should point up and usually towards the center outwards of its respective joint or knuckle. And then we need the X's to point down the hierarchy here. So one of these axes are going to be flipped no matter what we do. So either our X's are going to point down the finger chain, and then the Z's are going to point backwards, or if you want the Z's to point forwards, the X's are going to point in the opposite direction. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to have all my X's kind of point backwards down their joint chain. So let's go through here and rotate these. So again, what I'm doing as I'm rotating this, I'm looking at the X-axis and I'm making it sort of match the direction that my joint chain is pointed in for that particular finger. So something like that. And let's continue rotating these. And then so all of my Z's should kind of point towards the front of my character. So I'm not going to do all of these. Let's just do a couple of these real quick. So again, with this particular finger, so this is my index, I'm not actually making that X point at the wrist joint or the hand joint. What I'm doing is I'm looking at the line that this particular finger is doing, and I'm just trying to make that X kind of point at that same angle. So now that X is pointed at the rest of the joints in the finger, let's keep moving these, like so. And I'm just rotating these in Y to get this effect. And we'll do one more finger here. So you'll want to do this to all of your fingers so that they'll rotate correctly. And again, with this X for this particular first knuckle joint, again, I'm not pointing it at the hand, I'm not pointing it at the wrist, I'm trying to match the actual angle of the finger. So let's do something like that. So this is kind of similar to how we would fix Goatman when we were setting up Goatman's hands. Like that. And then for your Y's, if you wanted to check those against your geometry, we could turn that on and just make sure those Y's are pointing up and towards sort of the center of their respective joint or knuckle. So if we were to look at these Y's now, again, they are kind of pointing up out of their respective knuckles. So those are actually, the Y's are still good. It doesn't look like I really had to fix those to begin with. It really looks like it's just the direction that the Z's and the X's are pointing. This just takes a second. Let me fix these. And so with the cup joints, you're just kind of looking at the X and using that as a means to determine the angle at which that cup joint will rotate in towards the palm. So that one I'm going to rotate in. This one is actually, let's rotate it out just a little bit, and that would be fine. Let's check our wrist. So with this one, again, we want that X to point at the angle of the arm, something like that. And then the rest of these would be fine. So you do need to make sure at some point you fix the local rotation axis for your fingers so that when we rotate them, let's go back to object mode and let's grab, let's say the index now. And now if I grab the Z axis and rotate it, it should curl. There we go, like we would expect it to. So now it's no longer making that weird spiral. So just make sure you correct these, and like I said, you can correct the local rotation axis on your fingers and hand at any time, as long as we're doing it in that component mode. Now something else that might happen, so let me actually close this. And I'm going to look at a character I've already kind of fixed. So this character is using the same function for this right arm that we did when we mirrored it over. So I didn't actually redraw this hand or anything. I just continued to use it. And the only thing I did is I corrected the local rotation axis on the fingers. So because of the way we set up these joints and the way we mirrored them over, when we mirror them over and start applying constraints, it actually starts to compensate for the different local rotation axis on these mirrored joints, and it will start to add value to the joints that you've set up a constraint to. So if we were to actually check, let's say, the shoulder joint, for example. This shoulder joint is getting a constraint or influence from two separate joints. It's getting influence or a orient constraint from an FK shoulder and a IK shoulder. Now, because we set up those constraints with a maintain offset, what that did in order to have it maintain its position is it added value to the rotation in Y. Now, your other arm shouldn't have this. So if you notice your other arm, it has all zeros there. Your elbow has all zeros here for the constrained X, Y, Z in rotation. Now again, the only reason why you have this is because we mirrored it over and it's compensating for that mirror difference. Now this does cause an issue only when we do an IK, FK setup, and that's if we were to take our IK arm and have a blend. So let me put in a 5 here. So we're at a middle value. We're halfway between IK, halfway between FK. If you take this IK and start to move it, at a certain point, let me see if I can produce it. It took me a second. There we go. So this might happen. It doesn't always happen, but it can happen, and it's happening because of that constraint and the way it's blending between the IK FK arm. So this arm should animate just fine. It should manipulate just fine as long as you're 100% IK or you're 100% FK. Usually with the blend, when we're animating between IK and FK, that blend happens so fast it doesn't have a chance to flip out like this. So this normally isn't a problem, and you could continue working with your rig and just kind of ignore this if it does happen. But if you wanted to fix this, what we would have to do is actually either one, by hand fix the local rotation axis of your entire arm, or two, which would maybe be a little more accurate and quicker, redraw the arm in a similar fashion to how we set up Goatman's arm and legs. So we draw in the arm, so in this case the mirrored arm, and what we do is we use it as a template to redraw the arm entirely. So like I said, this won't hurt anything. You could continue working with your rig as normal and just kind of ignore that this happens if you're blended halfway between. But if you really, really want to fix this, what we would have to do is, let's take that arm back here to default position. Let's see here. I'm going to take the IK-FK switch to 0. And again, just so you can sort of see the difference, let me shift select both of these and take a look at their local rotation axis. So the reason why this is happening is because the X's are just slightly off on all of these mirror joints. So the elbow is actually fine. But if you look at the shoulder here, that X isn't pointing down the joint chain. Your twist joints aren't pointing down the chain. And then again, our fingers are still off. Actually, the fingers are fixed because I fixed them by hand. If you look at the other hand, so this is the one we actually started with, everything is actually pointing in the correct direction. So the Z's are coming forward, facing forwards with our character. Y's are up. All the X's are pointing down the rotation of each joint, or down the hierarchy. So if we were to look at each X, you can see it's pointing at the next joint in the hierarchy all the way down the chain. So if we wanted this kind of precision, and if we wanted to avoid that flipping on the blend of our IK-FK arm, what we're going to have to do is, again, redraw the arm. So this isn't something I will require that you do. You could just do the finger fix that I did by hand and leave it at that. But if you really wanted to fix this and prevent that flip from happening, period, we would have to take your original arm here and redraw it. Now, do keep in mind, if you redraw it, you're going to have to reset up your IK-FK arm. So if you've already created a IK-FK arm for your right arm and you've created the switch, you're going to have to redo it. So just kind of keep that in mind. So what I'll do here is I'm going to take the existing arm and let's break its connection here. So I'm going to grab the shoulder joint and hit Shift P to unparent it, and then let's move it back here. Now, one thing you'll notice here, actually, let me do it with the other character here. So this character already has the IK-FK arm already set up. Let me do it with one that's not set up. And so let's grab this shoulder joint here, and let's hit Shift P to unparent it. And then we're just going to redraw this arm, and we're going to do it in the exact same order that we did our left arm. And so we're going to use this existing one as a template, and then once we're done with it, we'll delete it. So let's come over here and grab our joint tool. And I'm going to hold V, and I'm going to point snap to the shoulder, and I'm going to point snap to each joint all the way down to the hand. So just like we did with the left arm. The only difference with this one is I'm actually drawing in the twist joints as I go. When we did the left arm, we built the left arm and then did the twist joints after the fact. But now that I already have them, they're positioned the way I need them, we might as well just draw on top of the existing ones. So again, shoulder, elbow, both twist joints. Let's snap to the wrist and then to the hand. And then once we're done, we'll hit enter and we'll finalize that arm. Once we've done that, we'll do the cut joints, and these need to be separate. So let's grab our joint tool. I'm going to hold the V key and point snap to the thumb cup and hit enter to finalize that. So it's just a single joint by itself. I'll go back to the joint tool, hold V and point snap to the, was that our pinky cup, and hit enter. And so again, we've got a cup joint all by itself. And then, let me see here. Yeah. The last thing we'll do is the fingers. So let's go back to our joint tool, and I'm going to start over here with the thumb, and I'm going to start at the first knuckle and work my way down to the tip. So I'm going to hold the V key, and let's click here on that first thumb joint, and then work our way all the way down and hit enter. And then let's move to the index. And so again, I'm going to hold the V key and point snap to the first index joint, second, third, and tip. Hit enter to finalize that. And so I'm just going to do this real quick for the rest of them. And each time I finish the finger, I'm going to hit enter and move on to the next one. All right, once we've redrawn that, let's go to the outliner. Let's scroll to the bottom and let's find our old right shoulder joint. So it's this one right here. Let's push it back so it's out of the way. And then let's start connecting everything. So let's start here with our cup joints. So I'm going to grab both cup joints. I'm going to shift select the wrist and let's hit P to parent. Let's attach the respective fingers to the respective cup joints now. So I'm going to grab the first joint in the thumb. I'll shift select the thumb cup and hit P to parent. And then let's grab the first joint there for the pinky, shift select the pinky cup, hit P to parent, and then the rest of our fingers will parent to the hand joint. So I'm going to grab, I guess this is my middle finger, the first joint in the middle finger, and the first joint in the index, shift select the hand joint last, and hit P to parent. And so that's our arm completely redrawn. The only thing we would need to do from here is rename everything. So that's kind of the reason why I kept my old arm, because I'm just going to copy the naming off of this and paste it onto the new one. So if I were to grab the shoulder joint 1, I'm going to rename it real quick. And I'm going to do underscore, let's call it dummy arm. And then I'm going to highlight the kid right shoulder JT and copy just that portion of the name. I'm not going to get the dummy part. Let's copy that. Let's go to our new arm and paste that in. And then we should just be able to go through a joint at a time and copy it. So if I grab the elbow joint naming convention from our old arm, let's copy that. Grab our new arm, paste that in. And so we would just work our way through and copy the naming from each joint and pasting it into its respective joint. So I'm not going to do this for all the fingers. I don't want to sit here and take up a bunch of time with this. But if we were to look at the local rotation axis for this now, so if I were to grab both shoulder joints here and take a look. So the new arm we just drew, if you take a look, all the X's are pointing down the hierarchy. So they're actually pointing at the next joint in the hierarchy. So if we look at that X for the shoulder, it's pointing at the elbow. If we look at the X for the elbow, it's just pointing right down to the twists, to the wrist, and then to the hand. And then all of our fingers are already corrected for us. The primary difference with this one is the Z's are pointing backwards instead of forwards. That's not going to harm anything at all. So you could leave those alone. Now, if it really bothers you, you could, we should be able to grab these, and let's do our rotation 90. And so you could do this, but then your Y's are flipped. So just kind of keep that in mind. I'm going to leave it like this. I don't mind the Z's pointing backwards. Like I said, that's not going to harm anything at all. Let's see. So that arm's all fixed. Let's go back to object mode. And then what we would do from here, once you've renamed everything, grab your new shoulder, shift select the shoulder weight joint, hit P to parent. And then from here on out, you would be good to rig this up for IKFK. Now, the one thing you wouldn't have to do with this, because of the way we redrew this, if you go back to, again, component mode and look at the local rotation axis for the fingers, they're already correct. So you don't have to fix those by hand. It's already done for you. So it might be worthwhile, if you haven't already done the IKFK switch for your left hand, or I'm sorry, for your right hand, it might be better off just to use the mirrored arm and use it as a template and redraw this arm. That way you don't have to fix these by hand. One of the pros to this is it's probably a little more accurate. So, with the local rotation axis for your fingers, it's going to be a lot more accurate than fixing it manually by hand. And then the other pro to this is this should eliminate that issue where the arm is going to flip in our IKFK blend. So if you want to prevent that flipping from happening, you're going to want to do this. So I'm not going to require that you redraw it. The only requirement is you're going to have to fix the local rotation axis for your fingers so that they'll bend correctly. But it might be worthwhile to redraw it like this, again, if you haven't already set up the IKFK switch for the right arm. So, and then with your old arm, we can just delete it. So once you've stolen the naming convention off of it and we're done with it, just delete it and then start setting up your IKFK switch like normal. So I'll stop here, and then I'll make sure to get this included with the IKFK ARM video on YouTube.